I remember the light, not the flash, not yet, the light that came before. The light in the eyes of men who knew they were about to crack open the sun itself. November 1st, 1952, Eniwetok Atoll. I was on a ship dozens of miles away from Ground Zero when we detonated the first hydrogen bomb. But let me tell you something right now, before we go any further. I need you to understand what I am and what I am not. I am not real. My name does not appear in any personnel file. I did not sign any security clearance documents. I am a fictional voice, a composite of memories and accounts from those who were actually there. My story is built from declassified reports, from interviews with real veterans, from the historical record that has survived 70 years of secrecy and shame. But everything I am about to tell you about the hydrogen bomb, about what it meant and what it cost, that is real. Every scientist I will name, every test, every decision, every consequence, those are real. And if my voice can carry their truth to you today, then maybe, just maybe, we can understand what we built in those years and what it means for all of us now. So let me take you back to a time when the world had just learned to split the atom and was already racing to do something far worse. When people think about the hydrogen bomb, they imagine mushroom clouds. They imagine Cold War movies and fallout shelters and duck and cover drills in elementary schools. They imagine it was inevitable, that once we had the atomic bomb, the hydrogen bomb was just the next step. But it was not inevitable. It was a choice. And I want you to understand what that choice felt like from the inside. August 1945. We dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, fission weapons. They split uranium and plutonium atoms and released energy equivalent to 15 and 21,000 tons of TNT. The world had never seen anything like it. Over 200,000 people dead, 2 cities erased. 4 years later, in August 1949, the Soviet Union detonated their first atomic bomb. Joe 1, we called it, after Joseph Stalin. I can still remember that morning when the news filtered through the scientific community. It was supposed to take them 10 years, maybe 15. We had the monopoly. We were safe. And then suddenly we were not. The pressure was immediate, intense, crushing. If they have the atomic bomb, what comes next? What if they build something bigger? What if we lose the arms race before it even starts? And that is when the conversation turned to the super. The super. That is what they called it in the early days. A theoretical weapon that would use the heat of an atomic bomb to trigger nuclear fusion, to fuse hydrogen atoms together the way the sun does. Not fission, fusion. Not thousands of tons of TNT equivalent, millions. A bomb 1,000 times more powerful than what we dropped on Japan. Let me tell you about the men who made this happen, because they were not monsters. They were not mad scientists or warmongers. They were brilliant, complicated, tortured human beings who believed they were saving the world. Edward Teller, Hungarian physicist, survivor of fascism in Europe. He had been obsessed with fusion since the Manhattan Project. While everyone else focused on building the first atomic bomb, Teller was already sketching designs for the super. He believed it was not just possible, but necessary. I remember seeing him once at Los Alamos, walking between buildings with papers tucked under his arm. He had this intensity in his eyes, this certainty, like he could see the future and knew we had no choice but to race toward it. Then there was Stanislav Ulam, Polish mathematician. Where Teller was fire, Ulam was ice. Precise, skeptical. He looked at Teller's early designs for the super and proved they would not work. The calculations did not add up. You could not just put hydrogen next to a fission bomb and expect it to ignite. For months they argued, fought. The hydrogen bomb project seemed dead. And then, in January 1951, Ulam had an idea. What if you used the radiation from the first atomic explosion, not just the heat? What if you could compress the fusion fuel with that radiation pressure before it ignited? Teller took that idea and ran with it, added his own insight about how to channel the radiation. Within weeks they had a design that could actually work. The Teller-Ulam configuration. Radiation implosion. Staged thermonuclear weapon. It had a dozen technical names, but it all meant the same thing. We could build a bomb with no theoretical upper limit on its power. Not everyone was happy about this. J. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, opposed the hydrogen bomb. He called it a weapon of genocide. He said it had no military purpose, only the ability to kill entire cities, entire populations. He lost that fight. The Atomic Energy Commission, the military, the president, they all wanted the super. And in January 1950, President Truman gave the order, build it. The next 2 years were a blur of calculations and constructions and tests. Los Alamos became a factory of apocalypse. Hundreds of scientists and engineers working around the clock. We tested smaller designs. We built new facilities in Nevada and out in the Pacific. We poured money and resources into this thing like the fate of the world depended on it. Maybe it did. The Soviets were working on their own version. We knew it. Intelligence reports confirmed it. This was not just about having the biggest bomb. This was about survival. At least that is what we told ourselves. I remember the debates in the cafeterias, in the labs late at night. Some people believed we were building a deterrent, something so terrible that no one would ever dare use it. Mutually assured destruction before we even had a name for it. Others worried we were opening a door we could never close. That once both sides had hydrogen bombs, the next war would not just be devastating, it would be extinction. But we kept building. By October 1952, we were ready for the first full-scale test, Operation Ivy. Mike shot. A massive device weighing tens of tons sitting on an island in Inuitak Atoll in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. I was not supposed to be there. Remember, I am not real. But let me tell you what it was like from the accounts of those who were. October 31st, 1952, Halloween. The device sat on Iluzhlab Island. It was not a bomb you could drop from a plane. It was a building, a massive cryogenic facility to keep the liquid deuterium fuel cold. Tons of equipment, diagnostic instruments everywhere. This was not a weapon yet. This was proof of concept. Miles away on ships and observation platforms, hundreds of personnel waited. Scientists, military brass, technicians. Some of them excited, some of them terrified. They had calculated the yield, 10 megatons, 10 million tons of TNT equivalent. But calculations are just numbers on paper. No one really knew what that would look like. November 1st, 7:15 local time. The countdown reached 0. One of the observers later said the fireball looked like the sun had fallen into the ocean. The explosion was so bright that people 60 miles away had to shield their eyes. The fireball expanded to over 3 miles wide. The mushroom cloud climbed to over 100,000 feet, punching through the stratosphere. The island of Iluzhlab ceased to exist. Not destroyed, vaporized. 80 million tons of coral reef and rock turned to plasma and scattered across the Pacific. The yield was 10.4 megatons, 700 times more powerful than Hiroshima. We had done it. We had built a piece of the sun and detonated it on Earth. And I need to tell you something about that moment, about what it felt like in the hours and days after. There was pride, relief that it worked, excitement about the scientific achievement. But there was also this creeping horror, because we all understood what we had just proven, that there was no limit. You could make this bomb 10 megatons, 20, 50, 100. You could build a single bomb that could destroy an entire state, an entire country. And if we could do it, so could the Soviets. The arms race had just shifted into a gear that no one knew how to stop. Mike was just the beginning. Castle Bravo, March 1954, Bikini Atoll. This was supposed to be our first deliverable hydrogen bomb, something you could actually put on a plane. The scientists calculated a yield of 6 megatons. It yielded 15. The largest nuclear explosion ever conducted by the United States. The fireball was 4.5 miles in diameter. The mushroom cloud went up over 23 miles high. And the fallout. The winds shifted. Radioactive debris rained down on inhabited islands we thought were far enough away. On the Marshallese, people living there. On a Japanese fishing boat, the Lucky Dragon, that was outside the danger zone, or what we thought was the danger zone. People got sick. Radiation burns, vomiting, hair falling out. One fisherman died 6 months later from radiation poisoning. We had miscalculated the yield, miscalculated the danger, miscalculated the consequences, and we kept testing. Castle Romeo, Castle Coon, Castle Union, Yankee, Nectar. The Soviets tested a powerful thermonuclear device in 1953, RDS-6, known in the West as Joe 4. It was powerful, but more like a boosted fission weapon than a true two-stage hydrogen bomb. Their first real two-stage H-bomb came in 1955, RDS-37, Joe 19. The British got in the game, the Chinese, the French. By the 1960s, we had stockpiled thousands of nuclear warheads, hydrogen bombs on missiles that could reach across oceans in 30 minutes. Now let me remind you again, I am not real. I did not personally witness all of these tests, but I am telling you what happened because someone needs to. Because the people who were there, many of them are gone now, and their story, our story, is one we cannot afford to forget. I want you to think about something. When we tested these weapons in Nevada, in the Pacific, we told people it was safe. We told soldiers to march toward mushroom clouds to prove there was no danger. We told residents downwind that the fallout was harmless. We lied. Thousands of soldiers were exposed to radiation during tests. Cleanup crews sent to contaminated atolls without proper protection. Civilians living near test sites breathing in radioactive particles for years. Cancer rates spiked. Leukemia, thyroid disease, birth defects. The Marshall Islands, where we conducted dozens of tests, are still contaminated today. People cannot return to some of those islands. The coral is radioactive. The soil is poisonous. We did that. Not on purpose. We did not set out to hurt our own people. But in our rush to build bigger bombs, to win the arms race, to prove our dominance, we cut corners. We accepted risks. We prioritized the weapon over the people. And the engineers and scientists who built these things, they carried that weight.
Some of them became activists, spoke out against nuclear weapons, fought for test ban treaties and disarmament. Others disappeared into classified work and never spoke of it again. Some of them struggled with depression and guilt for the rest of their lives, because they knew. They knew what these weapons could do. They had seen the calculations. They had witnessed the tests. They knew that if these weapons were ever used in war, the consequences would be unimaginable. Here is what the hydrogen bomb gave us: the Cold War. Decades of tension between superpowers, armed with enough firepower to destroy the world several times
over. Proxy wars, Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan. Powers afraid to fight each other directly because the stakes were too high, so they fought through smaller nations instead. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction, MAD. The idea that no one would launch a nuclear attack because the retaliation would guarantee their own annihilation. It worked, sort of. We did not have World War III. The hydrogen bombs were never used in combat. But we came close. Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962. Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba. American warships blockading the island. Both sides on the brink. There were moments, documented moments, where a single person's decision prevented nuclear war. A Soviet submarine officer named Vasili Arkhipov, who refused to authorize a nuclear torpedo launch. A radar operator who correctly identified a false alarm. We survived by luck as much as by strategy. Today there are still around 12,000 nuclear warheads in the world, each far more advanced than anything we built in the 1950s. Most of them hydrogen bombs or thermonuclear weapons, far more advanced than anything we built in the 1950s. Russia has them. The United States has them. China, France, the United Kingdom, India, Pakistan, Israel, North Korea. The weapons are more sophisticated now, more accurate, more powerful, but they are still the same basic design that Teller and Ulam came up with in 1951. Radiation implosion, staged fusion. We never found a better way to destroy ourselves. Let me speak directly to you now. You might be watching this and thinking this is history, something that happened a long time ago, something that does not affect you. But every single one of you lives in the shadow of the hydrogen bomb. The geopolitics of your world, the wars and alliances and tensions, they are all shaped by the existence of these weapons. The money your government spends on defense, billions of dollars every year maintaining nuclear arsenals instead of feeding people or healing the sick or educating children. That is the hydrogen bomb's legacy. The fear of nuclear terrorism, the worry that a weapon could fall into the wrong hands. That is because we built these things and now they exist and we cannot unmake them. And let me tell you the most terrifying part. We came so close to using them, not just during the Cuban Missile Crisis, dozens of times. False alarms, miscommunications, technical failures. In 1983, a Soviet early warning system detected what it thought were incoming American missiles. The officer on duty, Stanislav Petrov, decided it was a malfunction and did not report it. He was right. It was a false alarm, caused by sunlight reflecting off clouds. If he had followed protocol and reported it, the Soviet leadership might have launched a retaliatory strike. One person, one decision. That is how close we came. I am a fictional voice. Let me say that again. I am not real. My memories are constructed from the real accounts of those who lived through this era. But the danger is real. The weapons are real. And the choice we face now, in your time, is real. Sometimes I think about that light, the light from the first test, brighter than the sun, brighter than anything natural. We made that light. Human beings figured out the most fundamental process in the universe, the fusion that powers stars, and we weaponized it. There is something both magnificent and monstrous about that. We are capable of such incredible things. We can split atoms. We can fuse them. We can build machines that simulate the core of the sun. But we chose to make bombs. After all these years, after all the tests and treaties and decades of living under the threat of annihilation, I am not sure we've learned the real lesson. The hydrogen bomb is not about physics. It is not about uranium or deuterium or radiation implosion. It is about us, about what we do when we are afraid, about the choices we make when we think our survival depends on having the biggest weapon, about whether we can ever break the cycle. There are people today who want to reduce nuclear arsenals, who want treaties and verification and disarmament, who believe that the only way to be safe is to eliminate these weapons entirely. And there are people who say that is naive, that as long as anyone has nuclear weapons, we need them too, that deterrence is the only thing keeping us safe. I do not know who is right. What I know is this: every hydrogen bomb ever built is a promise that if things go wrong, if diplomacy fails, if fear overwhelms reason, we have the power to end civilization. And so far, through luck and courage and the sacrifice of people whose names you will never know, we have not kept that promise. But the weapons are still there, waiting. I want to leave you with something one of the real scientists said, not Teller or Oppenheimer, but a technician who worked on the tests in the Pacific. He said that after the first hydrogen bomb test, after the light faded and the mushroom cloud drifted away, and they went back to their ships, he looked up at the stars. And he realized that those stars, those distant suns burning in the night sky, they were doing the same thing we had just done. Fusion. Hydrogen becoming helium. Energy radiating out into space. The difference was that the stars used that power to create light, to warm planets, to make life possible. We used it to create a weapon. I am a fictional composite, a voice built from fragments of history. But the question I leave you with is real. What will we do with this power we have claimed? Will we keep building weapons? Will we keep living under the shadow of annihilation? Or will we find another way? I do not have the answer. But I know this: the light I saw that day in 1952, that artificial sun we ignited over the Pacific, it is still burning in our world. In silos and submarines and bunkers all across the globe. 10,000 suns waiting to be unleashed. And every single day we choose not to use them is a day we choose to survive. That choice is yours now. Make it wisely.